You can see it in the waveform here. These big boom, boom, boom things happening. I hate it. I have a proposition. If you are not regularly making mistakes, there's a good chance you're not pushing very hard. Something to think about. Today, I want to share with you some of my recording mistakes. You can listen to them and bask in my shame, if you like. But I'm going to talk about those mistakes and the lessons I've learned from them, because I've made lots of mistakes, because I've made lots of music, and the two go hand in hand. Speaking of mistakes, it would be a mistake to mix your next song without a process. I've developed a process. I'd love to share it with you for free. Go to 5stepmix.com to download my free 5-step mix guide. It'll do two things for you. It'll help you know if you've gotten it right at the source, which is a big one. And it'll also help you mix better and faster than you ever have. You got nothing to lose. Go check it out, 5stepmix.com. I can rattle off every mistake in every project I've released. I keep a list in my head of the things that I would do better if I were to do that again. That doesn't mean I have any regrets about the projects that I've released. See, here's the thing. Comparison, you've heard the phrase, comparison is the thief of joy. Not true. Not entirely true. There are good comparisons and there are bad comparisons. There's helpful comparisons and unhelpful comparisons. From the bad comparison standpoint, if you're comparing your music to some arbitrary standard, perfectionism, for example, then yeah, you'll always be disappointed in your music. That's no bueno. If you're comparing yourself to someone else, that's also no bueno. You'll never be happy because you'll never live up to someone else's standards. However, what if you compare yourself to yourself? What if I compare today's music to yesterday's music? That's a comparison I can get behind because I can then see my progress. I may not be at these arbitrary standards that I may want to get to one day, but I can see that I'm better today than I was last year. That's what I love about calling out the mistakes in my music, because once I make a mistake, I commit to learning from that mistake, and I don't have to make that mistake again. So the mistake is almost a teacher that says, hey, here's how you can improve. It's like a roadmap for how to get better. So the mistakes I'm going to show you today, there's a really good chance I will never make those specific mistakes again because I learned my lesson from them. And that's what this is all about. Mistakes can be a wonderful teacher if you let them. Here's a question. I'm about to show you mine. Show me yours. That was gross. What are some of your biggest mistakes you've made in the studio? Let's have it in the comments below. I'm going to share 4 big mistakes in this video. A couple of things before I do. One, you may listen to these and say, Joe, that still sounds good. Sure, I don't let huge, massive mistakes make it into the recordings. I typically fix a lot of the big, like, showstopper mistakes, but there will always be imperfections there. These are some that kind of take resonance in my brain that really irked me and still irk me to this day. So let's jump into the first one. I've told this story before. These are the guitars, specifically the acoustic guitars from my album Out of Indiana. This is an album that I released in the first year of starting Home Studio Corner. And I recorded all the guitars in a single day, Saturday, in an apartment in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I came back a few weeks later to listen to the guitars that I recorded because I was flying through. I recorded all 10 songs in a day. And I wasn't happy with the recordings. I recorded them in stereo using 2 mics kind of like this and pretty close to the guitar. Now it turns out they were too close. So in the headphones, they sounded pretty good, but when I listened back later, and especially when I went back to mix them, they were just a pain. There was too much happening in the low mids. So here's one guitar, and by itself, it's not too bad. What helps is it's a cool guitar part and a cool chord progression, but still, there's some thickness there that I do not care for, and I'll show you how it plays itself out here in a second. When it plays that hammer-on thing, it kind of has just this woo, woo, woo thing that's going on. You could fix it with EQ, but it's just not great. Then, later on in the song, a second guitar comes in. It's capoed up, but when you play those two together, if I pan the first one to the left and then play it with the one on the right, that's when that build-up starts to happen. I literally am developing a headache right now. It's a superpower I've developed over the years where that resonant thing happening at like 150, 200, 250 hertz, somewhere in there, gives me a headache. Listen to it again. It goes, woo, 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 woo. I hate it so much. Goo, 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 every time I downstrum on the guitar. And since I only owned the one guitar, that had that one kind of resonant thing going on. It was all over that album, and it was such a headache. I literally have a headache right now, right back here, because of that sound. What would be the solution? Just back away from the microphones a little bit. Yeah, we could EQ this. It's not the worst thing in the world, but I remember mixing this album and being really frustrated with the guitar tones because they didn't mix well, because there was just they were either too thin or too muddy, and it was really hard to find that balance. It would have been so much easier if I just backed off and didn't have that goo 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 thing happening. You can see it in the waveform here. These big boom 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 things happening. I hate it. Mistake number 2 involves this honking thing over here. If you're not familiar, this is the Yamaha Motif ES8. It's ancient. I think it's like a 20-year-old keyboard. I bought it for this project. I wanted a keyboard for whatever reason, like I wanted to plug this keyboard in and just record those sounds for some reason. And I did, and it's got some cool sounds on it, for sure. The pianos are not necessarily one of the cool things on this keyboard, but I forced myself to do it. So all the pianos on the album, Better This Way, I don't love because they came out of this when I could have been using really nice samples, but I'm stubborn sometimes. But that's not the big mistake I want to talk about here. The big mistake here is the way that I plugged this in. It had a buzz. I didn't have a DI box, so I just ran really long, like guitar cables from out of this into my mixer. And I want to say they were probably like 20 feet long, which 20-foot long, unbalanced cables, that's a recipe for noise. They're like big honking antennas. They're going to pick up everything. Ideally, I would have run small, unbalanced cables out of this into a stereo DI box that balanced the signal and then sent it out over XLR. Plug that in. I would have probably not had the noise problem. However, I did. So here's that piano track. And this was a fun song because this song actually played and sang at the same time, and that was the final version because I wanted to speed up and slow down the tempo. But you can hear on this kind of last bit of the song, you can hear that insidious buzzing happening. You hear that? I mean, just this constant buzz. So in the mix, I did some combination of rolling off a lot of high end, notching out the specific frequency, but then all the pianos ended up being pretty dull because I had to get rid of that. And there's certain parts throughout that album where in the quiet sections of the song, which this is a very intimate sounding song, it's beautiful, there's reverb, there's all this stuff, and you hear just this distinct in the background going through. Is it the end of the world? No. Did it annoy me? Absolutely. Mistake number 3 has to do with electric guitar, specifically, hold on, let me grab it. This guitar amp right here. This is the Vox AC4. I don't know if they make it anymore. I'm pretty sure they don't make the head cabinet version anymore. It's a cool amp. It was pretty cheap. It looks really cool. I bought it when I was working on my album, Help of the Helpless, and I decided to be very all or nothing and record all my guitars through that. All of them. And I had a bunch of them. Problem is, it's a very distinct sounding amp. It doesn't really take pedals very well. It's got some overdrive, a good amount of overdrive. It's not very clean at all. And it's got a whole big honking amount of mid-range, a whole lot of mid-range, which on a single track can be cool. But when you use it on every single guitar track, you get this mid-rangey buildup. That was a real pain in the mix. And I never was really happy with the electric guitars, most of the electric guitars on this album, because of that. Hindsight, I realized that was the problem. But at the time, I hadn't played electric guitar a whole lot. I'd been an acoustic guitar guy, and this was kind of the first like decent guitar amp I'd ever owned. I'd usually use like floor models or software, but when I finally replaced this or added the Fender Deluxe Reverb, I realized, oh, this is what a clean amp sounds like. That anyway, it gives me lots of different tones and options. This one gives me kind of one tone. So let me play it for you. So here's what that sounded like on like the 2 main guitars on this song. It's a cool tone. It's just guitar, like I think Les Paul into that. It's delightful. The problem was I wanted more guitars than that. There are 6 guitars on this song, and they all have that same mid-rangey sound to them. So added up, they sound like this. This is one of those, it's not the end of the world, but imagine trying to get all those guitars to blend together. I wanted all those different parts, but they all sounded exactly the same. So frequency-wise, it was hard to get to hear the different sounds. It feels to my ears very mid-rangey, and there's no real depth of low end to it. The brightness is all almost exactly the same in all of them. I just don't like it. Mistake number 4, the infamous Someone to Blame EP. In 2017, I made a goal to release 4 EPs, 1 per quarter for the year. I released 3 of them. Someone asked me the other day, hey, where's the 4th one? It never happened, just so you know. And each album cover says 1 of 4, 2 of 4, 3 of 4. So there is no 4 of 4. I should make it one day. It'd be kind of funny. But anyway, this was I believe the first EP of that year. I did this one, then I did an acoustic EP called Rain, then I did Fighter, which was a really fun one. But this one, not this one, I'm pointing at the amp. This EP, we recorded I was in a basement studio with a separate room for drums. It was a small room. And it was a stressful day, had everything set up. We recorded drums and bass, and I think I played some guitar as well. But I goofed up the recording. So I was running the snare drum through this channel strip over here. It doesn't matter what it is, but it has EQ and compression on it. I dialed in some compression and went on with my day. We recorded all day, did 4 or 5 songs, and they packed up and went home. I went to listen a little bit to what we had recorded, and I discovered this. I'll play it for you like I discovered it. Overall, the drums were kind of cool. It sounds like it's in a small room because it was, but given that it's a small room, I was kind of digging the sound. My buddy who played bass on this brought over this cool old like tube, like compressor sort of thing, so we ran a mic through that. This like vintage, dirty, nasty thing. There's a bathroom next to the tracking room. So I put a mic in there, so we got a cool room sound. Just something to work with. And overall, I'm thinking fine. So the whole day of the session, I'm thinking cool, drums are fine. I come in later, and I come to listen to the individual pieces of the kit, and that's when I discover this. Listen to the snare drum. What? As soon as I heard that, I put my head in my hands. I'm pretty sure my heart was racing. I felt terrible. I almost said I should call them and have them come back to re-record everything, which of course I didn't do. What happened? I set the compressor really aggressive on that top mic of the snare drum, and it was set to just way too much compression and a pretty fast attack time. So instead of being whack, it's like thunk. It's this weird little... just weird. It's got some snap to it. I'll give it that. Anyway, I was very sad about that. Thankfully, I had a bottom snare that was helpful, and then the rest of the kit, the overhead sounded okay. On the snare drum specifically, the cymbals were a little kind of shrill, but anyway, that was one that entire tracking day. It was more just an oversight. I ended up making it work. I like the EP. I'm happy with it, but I've never been super happy with the snare drum sound because of that. Maybe you've made similar mistakes. Maybe you've made worse mistakes. You know what's not a mistake? Releasing music. Release your music. Don't wait for it to be perfect. Put it out there so you can learn from whatever mistakes you did make and apply those learnings to the next project. That's the secret. That's the way forward. That's what you got to do. That wraps up this video. If you want to watch one all about good versus bad vocal recordings, check out this video here. Thanks for watching. See ya.